Sony made 4 major announcements to their APS-C line, but only one really excited me: the 16-55 f2.8G lens. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there hasn't been an APS-C lens with a constant aperture of f2.8 that can zoom until now. The question is, what took so long? We're gonna answer this question in this video. A couple weeks ago, I had a chance to play with this lens along with the Sony A6600, and while it's a stretch to say that this lens is a mini 24-70 G Master, the user experience at least doesn't feel too far off, because when we take the crop factor into consideration, we're getting a 24 to an 82.5mm full frame equivalent. I'm going to share with you my experience more later in this video, as well as answering a few top questions that I received from my last video. Is the Sony A6600 plus the 16-55 better than the A7 III with the 24-70 G Master? Will I be getting this combination, and should you even consider it? And before we get this video started, I just want to thank our friends over at Squarespace for sponsoring a portion of this video. A few years back, interviews with Sony have surfaced from other news outlets that they're not giving up on APS-C. So whoever said APS-C is dead is, you know, kinda silly. Gee, I wonder whoever said that, right? But who can blame our doubts when we've gone through nearly 3 years with no new APS-C lenses since the launch of the Sony A6500 back in November 2016. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only new APS-C lens that we've gotten in between the years from Sony is the 18-135, which is technically a new kit lens. And while it's surprisingly a fantastic kit lens, it's not that exciting enough for longtime APS-C shooters. It still left a lot to be desired, mainly a dedicated APS-C zoom lens with a constant aperture of f2.8. If you've ever been a part of our Monday lives, then you would be all too familiar with the conversations we've had about this once mythical APS-C lens. So, what the heck took so long? Now, this information right here comes straight from the horse's mouth, or rather this pamphlet right here and the press event that I went to a couple weeks ago. Basically, Sony wanted to make sure they bring something new to the table before releasing a new APS-C lens. And while it's not obvious on the outside, it is the inside where the new technology is housed, the extreme dynamic linear motor. Without getting into the whole technical mumbo jumbo of things, essentially what you need to know is that the moving parts inside of the lens are delivering a higher back and forth thrust to achieve focus quickly and at the same time smoothly and quietly. Because the Sony cameras can focus extremely fast, the lenses need to have this updated motor to keep up with the instructions the camera gives it. Ideally, if you were to compare with older lenses without the XD linear motor, the one with the new motor will get way more usable shots, especially if you're shooting anything that is high speed and it's coming towards or away from the camera. You would find the older lenses struggle a bit in those situations. I believe the XD linear motor initially appeared in the 400mm G Master and started making its way to the other GM lenses that came out after, such as the 135. And now we're seeing it even in the G lenses for the APS-C. Let me know in the comments down below if you think this new technology justifies the wait for this new APS-C lens. Now, that could add to the reason why this has a $1,400 price tag and possibly the tariffs that have been going on in the recent year. That's why you see price increase for the Tamron 20-75 f2.8. It went from $799 US to $879. Now, I don't know too much about the whole tariffs deal, so if you have a better clue than I do, please let me know in the comments down below and I'll pin your comment. Anyways, how is this lens? The moment I hold the 6600 with the 16-55 G lens, I was in love. With the A6600 use of the bigger battery and the slightly bigger grip, the combination felt very well balanced in the hands. Okay, there's a slight front drag when you hold it with one hand, but when you two-hand it, what I'm trying to say is when you hold it with two hands, it feels substantial. It's like you're holding the perfect package. I don't even know what I'm describing anymore. What I'm trying to say is this is a fantastic run and gun combination for both photos and videos, especially for video because you have a headphone jack, the longer battery life, and no screen dimming when you're shooting in 4K. This is a mid-range zoom lens. You can get a nice wide shot and then zoom pretty significantly to get tight detail shots or even shots from a distance away. While my previous main run and gun lens for the APS-C, the Zeiss 16-70 can reach even further, it was very limiting at f4 and it would crumble in low light. This f2.8 will provide a lot of flexibility and I don't mind the zoom ending off at 55. Again, I feel like I have a lot to work with this one lens alone. But if that zoom at 55 isn't enough, combine it with the other new zoom lens, the 70 to 350 millimeter. These two lenses here can tackle a variety of shooting situations, events, weddings, and sports. And don't feel like you have to get the Sony A6600 just to use this lens. Remember, it also works on the A6500 as well, though the A6500 is much lighter compared to the A6600, so you will really feel that front drag when you're holding it with one hand. Remember, you gotta two-hand it. But yeah, I would advise A6500 users on holding off on the upgrade and just get this lens instead if you really want it. I'm gonna go into more details in just a bit. I also really appreciate the filter size thread being 67 millimeters on both lenses, so you can share the same ND filter or polarizer on both lenses. But this personally excites me more because I own a lot of lenses that are 67, so I don't have to buy more step-up rings or new filters for that matter. And no, this lens does not have built-in stabilization, so for A6400 users, it's a little unfortunate. But for A65 and A66 users, y'all have IBIS. Regardless of which model you use though, when it comes to gimbal usage, you might want to use a gimbal with stronger motors because when I zoomed all the way to 55 on the Ronin SC, let's just say it was having some sort of performance dysfunction. God, what has this video become? So, I said a lot of good things about that combination. Does that mean I think it's better than the Sony A7 III with the 24-70 G Master? Of course not! Full frame is always better. Hashtag APS-C is dead. Well, we're talking about crop sensor versus full frame sensor, and obviously full frame does have several advantages. More bokeh, better in low light, and sharper? That's subjective, I think. But the A6600 along with the 16-55 lens is much, much lighter, and I can see that being very appealing to a lot of people out there, including myself. The A6600 along with the 16-55 is a whole pound lighter compared to the A7 III and the 24-70 G Master. Now, some would argue, why not get the A7 III with the Tamron 20-75? It's much lighter than the 24-70 G Master if you're complaining about the weight, and the cost is very similar to the A6600 with that new lens. Obviously, go for full frame because full frame is better. Let me just say this now, if you love full frame, don't deny yourself of the amazing Tammy combo. And yes, while in Tammy we trust 28mm on the wide end isn't wide enough for me and for a lot of people. I've mentioned this in my review already. Even when I started using the Tamron again recently, the 28mm still trips me up. I wouldn't use it by itself. I would need to carry the 17 to 28mm lens at least. But the 16-55, again, the 16 is a 24mm full frame equivalent. I have that breathing room in the wide end. However, you might feel differently. It all comes down to personal preference. Again, if you feel the full frame is a better buy, then you're making the best choice. If you want the lighter size, something that doesn't take up too much backspace, but still have the best versatility, the A6600 with the 16-55 G lens might be worth taking a look at. If you have questions about using full-frame Tamron lenses on your APS-C camera, please refer to this video up here at the 6-minute 25 mark. And finally, will I get this combination myself, and should you get it for yourself? Well, I'll say this, I will likely pick up this lens, but not the Sony A6600. I will likely get this lens when Sony releases the next APS-C camera with 4K 60p. While the A6600 has a lot of improved video features over the A6500, it's still up to 4K 30 frames per second and 1080p 120 frames per second. Same video frame rate since the A6300, which is a bummer. The next camera that I'm actually considering is the Sony A7r Mark IV, which already has those improved video features covered. While it also doesn't have 4K 60p, I really love the fact that in full frame, you get 61 megapixels, and in APS-C mode, you get 26 megapixels. I've always believed the A7R series have been the hybrid camera for Sony, the king in both photos and videos. So I don't need to spend an additional $1,400 on an APS-C camera with nearly the same specs. On top of that, if I want to, I can also get this lens when it's launched and pair it up with the A7R Mark IV because again, in crop mode, I still get 26 megapixels to work with. It is lighter than a 24-70 G Master with the same versatility and the same megapixels to play with. Maybe not the same amount of bokeh, but for the lighter carry, it's not a big deal. If I wanted more bokeh, I'll bring my prime lenses. But what about you, my lovely viewer? If you've been waiting for a versatile zoom lens with an f2.8 constant aperture, I think this is it. Pair this up with an A6600, you can do a lot of serious work with this setup. Again, if you have the A6500, you can hold off on picking up the A6600 unless you feel like you really need the bigger battery, the longer recording, and the no screen dimming in 4K, along with the other 7 top features I mentioned in my previous video. Now, because of this A6600, I feel like we won't get another APS-C camera until late next year in 2020. Otherwise, your next upgrade is a full-frame camera. The A7 III if you're more photo-oriented, or the A7S III if you're more video-oriented, if it ever gets announced. Now, I can't promise you third-party brands will make an equivalent of this lens anytime soon. It seems like most of them are focused on prime lenses, i.e. Sigma and Rokinon. But again, if they are, it would be at least another year or so before we actually see something. Until then, if there's enough interest, I might do a user experience review on the A6600 along with the 16-55G lens. If not, at the very least, just the lens itself. Let me know in the comments down below, how do you feel about the 16-55G lens? Is this something that you've been waiting for forever now? Are you gonna be picking up this lens? Is this gonna elevate your photography and your videography? Let me know in the comments down below. Guys, thank you so much for watching, but before you go, I'm sure you heard by now, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to create beautiful and clean websites. Recently, Vivian and I launched our free filmmaking course and we created a landing page to house all 5 tutorials. Creating this page took us no more than 30 minutes to put together thanks to Squarespace user-friendly interface. Whether you need a website to build a portfolio or an e-commerce store, build it with Squarespace. Start your free trial today, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/JasonVong to save 10% off your website or domain. See you guys in the next video. Peace.